There are moments in life when the question that escapes our heart isn't polished, isn't rehearsed, doesn't carry theology or ready-made phrases. It's born raw, heavy, almost like a choked-up cry for help. Jesus, how do I find peace in the middle of this storm? This question doesn't appear when everything is fine. It forms when the ground shakes, when the future becomes blurry, when your heart throbs, tired of trying to be strong. Maybe that's exactly where you are right now. Not looking for a philosophical explanation about faith, but looking for air, for a place to hold on to, a Jesus, please, sustain me. It's strange, but we only learn the true depth of that question when the noise of life becomes too loud. And if we're honest, most storms aren't made of the problems outside of us, but of the conflicts inside of us. They're those nights when you try to sleep but can't. Those mornings when you wake up and your chest already feels heavy. Those thoughts that show up without permission, and in that internal confusion, there's a feeling that hurts deeply. The fear that Jesus is silent when you need him the most. But maybe that silence isn't absence. Maybe it is the kind of silence that prepares the heart to hear something that can only be spoken softly, because deep truths never arrive shouting. They come close, with gentleness. When we look at the scene of the disciples in the boat, a violent storm throwing waves everywhere, the wind tearing through the air, the sea rising as if it had teeth, we see desperate men strong on the outside but shattered on the inside. And Jesus? He sleeps, not out of indifference, but because the storm that frightens you does not frighten the one who created the sea. Sometimes that is the hardest answer to accept. Jesus does not react the way we react. He doesn't panic because the sky darkened. He doesn't despair because the waves grew. He doesn't lose control when we do. He sleeps because he knows he is in command, even when it looks like he isn't doing anything. And this is one of the greatest spiritual battles we live, believing that God is working even when we see no movement. The human mind has been trained to measure God's presence by what we feel, but true faith is sustained by what we know about him, not by what our emotions can process. Whoever looks only at the storm will always see chaos, but whoever looks at Jesus finds direction, even if the scenario remains difficult. And here is a truth that transforms. Peace is not the absence of storms. Peace is the presence of Jesus in them. So the question begins to change. It's no longer, Jesus, why won't the storm stop? But, Jesus, how can I anchor myself in you while it continues? Imagining Jesus standing up in that boat is imagining calm taking shape. He doesn't get up in a panic, doesn't stumble, doesn't run, doesn't shout. He simply stands. And when he stands, everything changes. Not because the wind decides to, but because the Creator speaks. A simple "be still" transforms the entire environment. But the deepest miracle wasn't what happened to the sea, it was what happened to the men in the boat. Jesus' most profound miracle is never what happens outside. It's what happens inside us when we understand who he is. And maybe your storm today has another name: anxiety, rejection, fear, debt, illness, loneliness, loss. Every person carries a different kind of wind hitting their face. But there is something all human storms have in common. They always amplify the feeling that we are alone. And that's when the voice of Jesus becomes essential. He doesn't promise a calm sea all the time. He promises constant presence, and presence changes everything. The presence of Jesus is the kind of reality that doesn't depend on circumstances, because it doesn't fluctuate with the emotional climate of the moment. He remains. When we realize that, something inside us begins to realign. The peace we look for isn't built with immediate answers, it's built with trust. A trust that is sometimes small, sometimes fragile, sometimes held up only by the thinnest thread of hope. But Jesus does not reject small faith. He welcomes it. He draws near. He strengthens. The problem is that we were taught to fight alone, to carry everything in our chest, to solve everything with our own hands. But there comes a point when your hands grow tired, and it's in that exhaustion that we learn to surrender. Not to defeat, but to surrender in trust. Surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It means allowing the one who knows more than we do to take over what we were never able to control. The peace you're researching for may only be waiting for this, For that moment when you sincerely say, "Jesus, I can't," but you can. That sentence is worth gold in heaven. It opens doors human strength cannot open. It breaks invisible chains. It softens the tight chest. It gives you your breath back. And then comes the most human, most Gerwig-like, most tender touch of this journey. You don't need to be perfect for Jesus to calm you. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to hide your tears. You don't need to pretend you're fine. Jesus never asked for that. He always sat at the table with the fragile, reached out to the afflicted, lifted the broken, welcomed the weary. He doesn't want you strong, he wants you real. Peace begins when you stop blaming yourself for feeling the way you feel. Deep down, Jesus is not asking you to control the storm. He is asking you to trust the God who controls everything, even what you do not understand. And if you feel, even if deep, deep within, a small movement in your heart as you hear these words, know this. That is already Jesus calling you closer. He is in your boat. He did not leave you. He will not leave you. He is peace before, during, and after every storm. There is a place in the human soul where words are no longer enough and explanations lose their meaning. Not because they are useless, but because there is a kind of pain that can only be understood in silence. The silence of someone who is tired of trying, tired of holding on, tired of smiling on the outside, while everything inside seems to collapse. And it is in this space between what we show and what we hide that the storm becomes stronger. It is not the strength of the winds that knock us down, but how deeply they find our internal cracks. Many times, the greatest storm is not what happens to us, but what happens within us. That is why it is so difficult to find peace in the middle of it. It's not just about calming circumstances. It's about calming thoughts, memories, frustrated expectations, old anxieties, and new fears that appear out of nowhere. The external storm only awakens what already existed quietly inside the heart. And here Jesus does not come as an argument, he comes as a presence that does not require you to tidy yourself up beforehand, that does not ask you to hide what you are feeling, that does not demand that you be strong. And he did not reject them for it. He did not shame them, did not punish them, did not turn his face away. And if Jesus did not reject desperate men that night, he will not reject you now. Because the pain you feel does not push him away. It draws him closer. There is a detail often overlooked in this story. Before the storm, Jesus told the disciples, "Let us cross to the other side." This means that the storm never had the power to interrupt the destination. The word of Jesus was always stronger than the wind. When God says, "We are going to the other side," you will go. Even if you go crying, even if you go afraid, even if you go wounded, even if you go slowly. You will arrive. And here enters something deep, almost Kaufman-like. The storm reveals what we try to hide even from ourselves. It reveals vulnerabilities, expectations, mistaken beliefs, old stories that still hurt us. Sometimes the external storm is only a mirror for the internal one, but Jesus specializes in realigning what is misaligned inside us. He calms the sea, yes, but before that he calms the heart. He calms the restless mind, the tight chest, the disordered thoughts. And when you experience this kind of calm, you realize that true peace is not a feeling. It is a person. Peace is not an emotional state. It is an encounter with Jesus. And then, almost imperceptibly, your perspective shifts. Not because the storm has vanished, but because you are no longer facing it alone. There is a peace that feels irrational, a peace that does not match the circumstance, a peace that doesn't make sense at first glance. It does not arise from logic, it arises from presence. And even knowing this, we try to stay in control. He heals from within it. The peace Jesus offers is not the peace of someone who has defeated everything. It is the peace of someone who is accompanied through everything. And that is where peace begins. Not when the wind stops, but when you realize that Jesus never left the boat. And maybe it is exactly here, in this place where the soul is too tired to fight alone, that Jesus performs one of the most silent and most transformative movements of the gospel. He teaches us to rest even while everything around us seems determined to bring us down. The real turning point doesn't happen when the storm goes away, but when we realize that the storm no longer has the power to determine who we are, what we feel, or what we will live. This realization, slow as a sunrise and deep as an old wound finally being touched with gentleness, opens space for an inner change that only the love of God is capable of producing. Peace doesn't arrive like applause. It arrives like a breeze. It doesn't come as a loud answer. It comes as a constant presence. And then, suddenly, and yet without hurry, we begin to understand something that Sorkin would frame as a narrative revelation. The storm did not come to destroy us, but to reveal what had already been built within us. Because there is a kind of growth that only happens in the absence of control. There is a spiritual maturity that only blossoms when we have nowhere left to run except into the arms of the one who never abandoned us. God does not waste storms. He turns every lightning bolt into clarity, every thunder into awakening, every strong wave into a chance to learn to trust again. But this learning is not linear, never has been. It is full of back and forth, highs and lows, nights when believing seems impossible, and mornings when faith rises again with unexpected strength. Kaufman would understand this perfectly. The human heart does not change all at once. It changes in layers, in small advances, in falls and reunions. And Jesus honors that process. He does not demand that you understand everything now. He only asks that you remain, stay in the boat. Do not give up, do not jump, do not surrender to fear. He is guiding something greater than you can perceive at this moment. And when this awareness settles in, when the soul finally understands that it is not alone, Something sweet begins to bloom. It is a different kind of peace, not the kind that depends on circumstances, but one that is born from the certainty that God is so close that even his silence makes sense. You realize that even when he is not speaking, he is working. Even when you don't feel him, he is sustaining you. Even when you don't understand, he is preparing the way. And this brings rest. A rest that doesn't come from the end of the storm, but from meeting Jesus in the midst of it. Maybe you are living exactly this right now, a confusing, heavy, uncertain phase, a stage that feels endless, a night that is far too long. Maybe your prayer has been repeated so many times it feels worn out. Maybe you have asked for peace, like someone asking for water in the desert. But today, Jesus reminds you that he is not only the calmer of storms, he is peace itself. He is not only beside you, he is within you. And when peace dwells inside, nothing outside can take it away entirely. And here enters Greta Gerwig's sensitivity, that deeply human touch that embraces, welcomes, understands, and gently says, "It's okay if you're still afraid. It's okay if it still hurts. It's okay if you still don't have answers." Jesus doesn't love you less because of that. He doesn't expect you to be perfect. He expects you to be honest. Want to know where peace begins? In sincere conversation. In the outpouring you've been holding back, in the tears you didn't let fall, in the prayer you couldn't make, in the moment when you finally say, "Jesus, I can't do this alone," and he smiles. He understands, he draws near, he holds, he calms. The emotional turning point comes when you realize you are being carried by something greater than logic, greater than human strength, greater than pain. Suddenly, it is no longer you who sustains faith. It is faith that sustains you. And then, even in the eye of the storm, a silent sentence is born within you. "I will not sink. Jesus is with me." From that moment on, the storm may continue, but it no longer governs your inner world. Peace takes the place that anxiety once occupied. Hope takes the space that fear once held. The certainty of God's love replaces the chaos. And you breathe. For the first time in a long time, you breathe deeply, knowing that it is not the wind that determines your destiny, but the voice of your Savior. And it is here, right here, that I tell you something with all the softness the gospel carries. You will make it through. You will reach the other side. You have not been abandoned. You are not lost. God is guiding your steps with a precision that no movement of the storm can undo. When you reach the end of this process, and you will look back and realize that it wasn't the storm that destroyed you. It was the storm that taught you to trust. It was the storm that brought you closer to Jesus. It was the storm that transformed your faith into experience, your doubt into encounter, your fear into surrender. And now, before moving toward the closing, I want you to hear something simple but profound. You deserve peace. You can rest. You have divine permission to breathe. And as this message reaches your heart, I want to ask you for something very special, spoken with all the spiritual tenderness possible. If this reflection is touching your life, if it is bringing peace, comfort, or strength, if it is reminding you that Jesus is with you, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription is not just a number, it is a sign that this spiritual journey is finding you. And that means a lot. You don't need to solve everything today. You don't need to understand everything now. You only need to do what Jesus has always asked, trust. Because true peace begins at the very moment you say, "Jesus, I can't do this alone, but I'm here. Stay with me." And he stays. And so, slowly, the storm that frightened you begins to lose strength inside your heart. Not because the winds have ceased, but because you are no longer facing anything alone. And that is true peace. Not the kind that changes the world around you, but the kind that changes the world within you. And as this peace is born, grows, and strengthens, I want to ask you for one final gesture. A gesture of faith, of journey, of spiritual connection. If this video spoke to you, if it brought comfort, if it brought light, if it ignited something inside you, if it made you remember Jesus, subscribe to the channel. This is a way of saying, I want to keep walking in the peace of God. And then leave the word peace in the comments so I can pray for you and so that the peace of Jesus continues to accompany you in every step. May the Lord cover you, embrace you, and calm you. May he turn the whirlwind inside you into rest. May He bring forth a good silence within your heart, and may you feel, in the deepest place, that you have never been alone. Jesus loves you, Jesus guards you, Jesus leads you, and He will give you peace in the midst of the storm.